Hello, everybody. I'm John Moffitt. I'm on the Town of Kiowa Island Town Council, and I wanted to thank you for joining us for another version of the Sharing with Our Community podcast. Today, we've got a couple of guests, Peter Schneider and Chris Corrada. Chris is a principal with the Riverstone Group, and the development that's become known as Andell West is Riverstone's development, and so Chris is representing them. And Peter is an active citizen in this whole process of bringing this project to life. So maybe if we could start a little bit, Peter, your role in this, if you want to say more than what I just did, and then Chris, maybe yours.
Well, I got involved. I think I made the mistake of writing about this on iKiowa, and then I got recruited in by the Cacique HOA because this property adjoins Cacique, and so we got very involved in it. Also Preserve Kiowa, I'm on the advisory board there, active, and so got involved to see how can we make this better, how can we make it work better for the community.
So Chris, your role?
Yes, I head up Riverstone Properties, which is the real estate arm of Riverstone Group, which owns the Kiowa Island Golf Resort and many other businesses throughout the Southeast. And I am in charge of getting this project known as Andell West off the ground and zoned, and we've been working on it for a number of years. Andell West is a commercial lifestyle center next to Freshfields that will be integrated with Freshfields, and we look to expand on the great success that Freshfields has had and all the success we've had here at Kiowa with the resort.
So Peter, from the community standpoint, what were your goals in getting involved in this? What is it that you were really trying to accomplish besides just watching Riverstone bring this development to life?
You know, I think you have to look at, this went through a lot of twists and turns, as Chris knows. It began as a potential annexation of the property, and there was going to be residential and commercial. And when we looked at it, a number of folks in the community, and we started hearing from folks in the community, we thought it could be done differently and again better. And so the first objective, it's one of the main objectives, was, is it possible to integrate this parcel, certainly the commercial part, with Freshfields? Because as originally proposed, they really would have been quite separate from one another. And so we were attempting to integrate them into one parcel. So you, architecturally and in all different ways, you wouldn't be able to distinguish between Freshfields and Andell West. So that was really the first focus. And the other was, let's make sure we have a very transparent process. We feel like good process makes good outcomes. We wanted to make sure we took time and got community input. So John, those were kind of that was at least the initial focus of those who were involved with this.
So Chris, from this path that was taken, does Riverstone look back on this project and say, wow, we ended up in a much better place than maybe where we started?
Yeah, it really does. The project initially started, I don't know if anybody knows this story, but really what happened at the very beginning, how we even got started with this, was Harris Teeter came to us because they needed to expand. They were in a situation where they needed a bigger store. They were not functioning how they wanted to, and they came to us originally to see if they could buy a few acres adjacent to their store where maybe they could expand. And then as we started talking to them, it became clear that they really wanted their store. They wanted to build, a full service grocery store because of all of the population and resort population here. So the first plan, as Peter said, really was just that. It was a grocery store. It was oriented towards Kiowa Island Parkway, and it would have had some adjacent retail and some other retail opportunities. But in retrospect, what we ended up doing is moving the store back, which really, for us, creates a bigger, better development. And so we're able to do things like the restaurant row concept, and we had to get creative on how are we going to fill this space, because basically the site got long and linear in order to create these connections with fresh fields.
So, so at this point, everybody has seen the schematic of what the proposed layout looks like.
Right.
Not store elevations or any of that,
Right.
but so what are your next steps in this process then?
So we will go to Planning Commission next month in Charleston County, and then immediately following that to the County Council. And then there'll be a period of, say, 8 to 9 months of design and approvals of civil plans, roads. There's a lot of things that need to be designed with this project. So you really won't see anything happen. Once the zoning happens, things will go a little quiet for a while as we're going through Charleston County's process and designing plans. And then the first thing you will see is site work. So our plan is to essentially do the site work for the entire center. The main road will be built, the connections will be built, and following with the Harris Teeter and adjacent retail. So one thing that's in our contract with Harris Teeter is that anything adjacent to their store needs to be built when their store is built, because they don't want construction going on once they're open. So effectively, that whole block will be built at once, and we're predicting now that the store will open January of '27. So there's a long process of civil plans, county approvals, site work, and then actual building construction.
Gotcha. So as a community member, I have my own list of where I think all of the benefits to this development lie, and quite frankly, I'm very excited about what you guys are going to bring.
Great.
And I think most people are. So Peter, kind of from the community involvement standpoint, what do you think some of the biggest benefits to the community will be, not just of the new Harris Teeter, but of the balance of this development? What does that bring to the community that is going to benefit us all?
Well, I think the way to think about it is this is the commercial center, if you will, of Kiawah Island. And what it does, it creates enough space where you can have what's there now and also expand without encroaching on other areas. And so by making it slightly larger, it actually opened up all kinds of options. By sliding the store back, which Riverstone did, it lined it up with the green space, the town square in Freshfields, and also created a new green space in Andell West. And so I think the benefit for the community is primary benefit. It's going to relieve the pressure that you see right now. Those of us who go to a grocery store, go to Harris Teeter, and it's just like a mob scene. It doesn't have everything you need. It's going to have a bigger grocery store, but it's still going to be in keeping with Freshfields and the architecture. That's the other thing. It's going to create the same look. Very important to us was keeping what's special about Kiawah special, and that's this coastal village feel with that architecture. You're going to have that too, and you need a good partner for that. I also think there will be a tremendous benefit in the flows between the two parcels. Again, the idea is not to make it have seams, and make it seamless. And that took the cooperation of Eden's. So Eden's owns Freshfields, Riverstone owns Andell West. And so what you had to have was the community, Freshfields, Riverstone, all working together. So I think another benefit is just, this is a good way to develop land. Last thing is you have to have a great partner. And the fact that Riverstone has the assets that they do on the island and the investment of the island, I think made it so that everything's better. And so that, again, Chris, you own a lot more land. So there are other opportunities in the future to blend in with this development.
So are there any downsides to this development from your point of view, as far as it relates to the community?
Not from my point of view. I mean,
I might weigh in on a few.
I'd like to add on a few other benefits. I mean, I think one thing from a traffic perspective, traffic is obviously a a hot topic
Yep.
around here. And if you're on Kiowa or Seabrook, what this means is you don't have to go fight traffic. You can get to new things that you need that you would normally have to go further into Charleston for. So it actually will limit your drive times. And then at the same time, all of those cars that were coming from here to Charleston are no longer on the road. So it actually benefits Johns Island as well, from a traffic perspective.
Right.
And from a retail perspective, this will all be market driven. We will build buildings as we have tenants, and the tenants will come because they see demand. And with all that in mind, I just see it as a great opportunity, to further create the commercial center
Yep.
of Freshfields and provide some things that Freshfields doesn't provide.
John, I think a detriment, and just depends how you look at the development of Kiowa Island. When you build things like this, people come, right? And so there are some, and you saw this in the community response, there are some who said, let's not make it better. Let's keep the store the size it is. Let's keep everything the way it is, because if it gets bigger, everything gets bigger. There'll be more people here, more traffic on the roadway. And we're contending with, there's obviously a medical center being built, there's other things in the area. And so there is a question about the infrastructure. At what point is there too much pressure on what's already here? Will the traffic overwhelm us? Will the number of people overwhelm us? So I think there's a little bit of a fear out there about that. And to me, that's a detriment. The way you solve that is you've just got to be really smart about how you do things and build things. And I think that is one of the great things about where we've ended up with Andell West, which is, I think it's going to be done very smartly. It's not too much. It's more, but it's not too much. But I think there's a danger that everything is going to be too much at some point.
Yeah. So Chris, a minute ago you talked about building the structures immediately adjacent to Harris Teeter when you do the store,
Right.
and then you do the others as you got tenants and so forth.
Correct.
Is there in your mind at this point a kind of a phased approach to that?
There is. Yeah, I think so. I think when people see these type of projects, they have to go through whatever zoning as a whole. And so people tend to think that the whole thing is going to pop out of the ground all at one time. But the reality is that's not really how it happens. This will happen fairly slowly. It'll seem slowly. But I think the logical progression is, number one, the grocery block, what I call it, the grocery store with the adjacent buildings and that parking and the entry road and the connection points. And then phase two is what we call Restaurant Row. There is demand from restaurateurs. We know we just had a community meeting here, and I constantly hear about the different types of restaurants that people would like to have.
Right.
And so I think that's what we can do that's unique from Freshfields, is create this little restaurant block around the Village Green. So I kind of see that being high demand from both sides, from the market and from the customers. And then the balance of it would be really market driven from there. But I think that pushes us out many years by the time we're ready for that third phase.
So if somebody was to say, can you put a time frame on that? Is it overall a 10-year project?
When it's all built out? Yeah, that's probably about right. And we would phase it so that any area that's being built is really isolated. So when you're coming in and out, you're not going through those areas. We'll build the main parkway in day one. Right. Any of those new sections being built would kind of be out of view until they're open.
So in terms of the disruption to the community during the construction phase, there is disruption whenever there's construction of sorts. Mm-hmm. But what you're suggesting here is that as you phase it, that you won't have necessarily added disruption because you've got vacant spaces.
Right. So we'll do what I mentioned earlier is we would do all the site work at once. So you'll have the whole site will be ready with these blocks ready to be built on and the road network built. And the blocks will be kept as lawn, manicured grass,
Okay.
lawn areas until they're ready.
Gotcha.
So once those areas are ready to be built on, they would be fenced off and isolated. Meanwhile, the streets would still be open, and people would be able to navigate in and out just like they always have been.
Gotcha. So, Peter, in your talk about the integration with fresh fields and so forth, as I recall, there were lots and lots of community comments regarding kind of how this was going to be developed and some of the uses on the property, like the fueling center and so forth. That and then are we going to provide extra bike paths, and are there going to be walking trails and all of that? How do you think that was dealt with in terms of the plan and where we ended up? Is that, in your mind anyway, has all that been brought to an acceptable completion in terms of the discussion?
Well, it was, yes, but there was a long list of issues. And I think we benefited from all that community engagement because we heard what was important. So you had on the list the fuel center, which, by the way, is a gas station. That's a nice way of saying that. But the fuel center was a big issue because do we really need another gas station in Kiowa? It seems like we have enough. But for Harris Teeter, that was an important part of it because you apparently get discounts for Harris Teeter if you buy gas, and so it's part of their business model. So the way we compromised that was to reduce the number of pumps so it's not overwhelming as part of the footprint, and actually lower the canopy on the fuel center so that big rigs, not that they would do it anyway, but big rigs are not fueling there to get cheap gas.
And I think there was some speculation early on, and I'm not sure where it came from, that this was a mega fuel center. I remember some language, and I guess these were on IKEA post, that this was I forget the terminology, but essentially a truck stop. But
like a quick trip or something.
Yeah. And really what it is there is no convenience store. It's just a small, it was always intended to be just a small fuel station that does exactly what you said. It gives
and you also, if I'm
rewards.
correct, you moved it back some.
We did buffer it,
and
yes.
did some more buffering than was originally planned.
That's correct.
So those are the kind of, see, we're still negotiating. I mean, those are the kinds of conversations we had. Can it be buffered? And Riverstone came up with a great way of doing that. It involved bricks and mortar as well as greenery around it.
We want you to drive in. When you drive in, we don't want you to see that. We want you to drive in just like you're in a beautiful resort commercial area.
And the original concern was it would be this lit up beacon on Kiowa. The first thing you encounter when you come into Kiowa is a gas station. And
so now it's the last thing you encounter.
Exactly.
Right.
So
it's so buffered, you really won't see it until you're in it.
Okay.
So bike paths was on that list because we wanted to create a way, but there are safety issues associated with that. So where do you put them? Buffering. There was the original plan, at least a conceptual plan, had residential at the very back of the property, which became an issue. It quickly came off the table. And so there were, and then uses. Are there certain uses, because this was a rezoning, are there uses that cannot be made on the property? For example, rental of construction vehicles. That's not an allowable use because it's not in keeping with Kiowa, and this is our little village center. And so there's a list of uses. There was a whole discussion about fast food restaurants.
Right.
You can have fast food, but what about drive-throughs? And the view was drive-throughs are not consistent with the character. So all of these, architecture was another one on the list.
On the uses, real quick, I think it's important just to say we started with the list of uses that are allowed at Freshfields as our model, and then we even pared that back further. So, based on community input and all of the things that the community didn't want in the center, we also didn't want. That wasn't a hard negotiation. They were things we weren't interested in that would be detrimental anyway.
Right. So besides Harris Teeter, obviously, if that was our starting point on this project,
right,
whenever that started, Do you know any of the other tenants that might be in the center at this point?
No, we don't, because we're still so far out. Like I said, it wouldn't make sense to really start negotiating with tenants this far in advance. But as we get through the next few months, that will start to ramp up, and we'll start to work on our architecture and building blocks, and then be able to have something we can take to tenants.
And is that something that normally you go out and hunt for tenants, or the tenants come to you hunting for space?
Well, that's, you want the latter. That means you're doing something right, and that has been the case so far. We do have tenants reaching out from Charleston, who want to be a part of it. They don't know exactly what they're going to be a part of, but they want to be here.
So there's some talk anyway.
Yeah, there's some talk. We don't have specifics, but we have a good, warm feeling that we'll be successful.
So as you look at this property that's going to be developed, there is a boundary line between this Andell West and the Riverstone's residual property in the Cacique area.
Yes.
Peter, what do you think happens to that strip of land there? What should happen to that?
Well, one thing that I learned in this whole process is we don't actually own this land. And so, so you always have to balance the community interest in, here's what we think should go there, with the fact that, we don't own it. And so that's where zoning comes in. Here there had to be a rezoning. Currently that land is zoned what's called R4, I believe, which is a single family residential. And so Riverstone has a right to build it according to that zoning. Only if there's going to be a variance, only if there's going to be a rezoning attempt, does really our ability to influence it come into play. Now we have influence because I think Riverstone cares of what people think. And so I'd love to keep it green space, but who knows where it's going to go. I think my own view is it should be a use that's compatible as a transition from a commercial area to what is clearly a residential area. And so I don't know if that's step down residential, if it's some other thing, but it just needs to be high quality from our standpoint. And Riverstone has committed as part of this process that before they do anything with it, and that could be way in the future, that they're going to work with the Cacique HOA and any other community, I'm sure with Toki as well, to make sure what goes in there makes sense from the community standpoint.
Yeah, and what we have now is, I think, a good framework. I mean, I think we've, worked through this project, and we'll be much more efficient in the future if we were to do something, but currently we do not have.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the model that has developed as a result of this iterative process is actually a good model, not just for additional things that Riverstone may want to do, but for other developments
Absolutely.
that anybody wants to do. Because
Yeah.
the process has been, some people might say it's been a little painful, but I think it's been, at the end, it's been productive.
It has. And you want, I mean, what you have to understand is, as a landowner and developer, we don't want to do things that the community doesn't want. That's not our objective.
Right.
We enter into these things with big ideas and things that'll be, add value to the community. And it's just getting to the point where the community ends up seeing the same vision. And I think, like you said, we've got a good template for that now.
Well, and I think it does help that Riverstone, as Peter suggested earlier, has such an enormous investment on this island. You guys don't want to do anything that would
No.
put that at risk either.
No, that is the crown jewel. So anything we do around it has to add value to it.
Right.
That's our number one goal.
Yep.
And
So,
John, one thing that the player who's not sitting with us today, but Eden's, which was a new purchaser of Freshfields, so they inherited this as an issue. I think they knew that Harris Teeter may leave, but Harris Teeter was vacating its space in Freshfields and moving to Andell West. So that was a complication there. And Eden's had to be a player at the table too. So the pedestrian and the vehicular connections, which resulted in integration, required Eden's of Freshfield and Riverstone, Andell West, to work together. And I think, Chris, you actually had to enter into a formal document.
We will, and we're going to be neighbors for a long time, so we're going to have lots of things to. So again, that's another, long-term relationship that we've cultivated and will only grow stronger over time. And we all have the same goals,
right.
Ultimately, even though you could call it competition, we both want this commercial center to be the best it can be.
And I think the citizens and the community members in and around Kiowa also would like both of these centers to be marvelously successful.
Absolutely.
Because it only helps the community.
Right.
So obviously, as you mentioned, Chris, the traffic is always on a top of mind issue on people's minds when they hear new buildings, construction, new traffic circles, more roads, more this, more that. And so if we continue with the development that exists in your plan now and whatever may happen in the future, how do you think that we should mitigate the traffic issues in that respect? We've only got one road in.
Right. In the short term, I think we have. Kiowa, the town of Kiowa owns the road, so the town dictates what needs to be done at our entrance, and that's really the thing we control and the town controls, and that'll be mitigated with a traffic circle there at the new entrance. And the traffic study that the town did shows that will solve traffic flows for a long time, and that's even assuming Andell West would build out very quickly, which it might not. I mean, it still could take a while. Like I said earlier, I think from a Kiowa resident perspective, it improves your traffic situation because you're having to drive less to go and get things, go places, go to restaurants, do things that you want to do. So it should eliminate drive time for someone who lives at Kiowa. And then like I said, from the rest of the community standpoint, those cars are no longer going on Betsy Care Center, wherever, to other
right.
places. So, you always want your services and your shopping as close as possible, and that's how you solve traffic problems, and that's essentially what we're doing here.
Good. Well, I appreciate y'all taking the time to participate in this podcast. If either of you has any, final comments, something maybe we didn't cover that you'd like to say.
Well, I would like to just thank Peter because he did step up and has spent a lot of his own time kind of being the point of contact, if you will, for a lot of various entities. That's the other challenging thing about this situation, and why I think it took a little while to get going is there's a lot of entities
right.
that all have their own, perspectives, and there needed to be somebody to step up and corral those groups. And I think Peter and I at a planning commission meeting had a talk about that, and we realized the need. We need to take all the concerns, consolidate them, and somebody needs to be the point of contact from the community standpoint, and he did that, and I appreciate it. I think that is also a good template going forward, is having sort of one person.
Kind of the clearinghouse for all of
Yeah, a
the
clearinghouse, one person to sort of be the negotiator and aggregator of community concerns, because you've got homeowners associations, towns, special interest groups, preservation groups. You've got all these different groups that all have their own little concerns. So I appreciate it very much, and I think that should be, I think the community should appreciate it too, because he did spend a lot of his own time, and I don't think it pays extremely well.
No pay on that one.
Yeah.
I appreciate it,
Yeah.
Chris. I appreciate you saying that. Corral was probably not the right word. I mean, but what was important is there are a lot of folks who care about what happens here. And so you had the town, Toki very involved. You had the HOAs, Kika, the Cacique HOA, both of them involved. You had the Kiowa Island Conservancy, which is focused on obviously the environment and how this affects the environment. You had folks who care about bike paths and traffic lights. No one wanted a traffic light, which that was in the hands of Toki, and figured out a way to do that. You had Preserve Kiowa, which is a group of sort of volunteers that want to bring transparency and better development to the island. And then you just had everybody who had an opinion. And so Chris is the one who had to listen to everybody. But what we were able to do in this process is put everyone around the table and synthesize their views and make a list and work through that list. I hope I didn't leave anyone out when I went through all those. And that's what we did. And we actually had a meeting where we had all of these organizations come in, and Chris presented the plan and got feedback from everyone. And so we were all right there around the table. And I think everyone brought the right spirit, and I think that made it better.
Good. Well, I want to thank both of you for your time. This concludes our episode. Hopefully everybody will have a chance to watch this. And if as a result you have any questions, you can certainly send those in to us at the town, and we'll get those answers back to you.